Hello there, everybody. It is Sue here, Sue Crooks, the founder of Love Biz and the host for lots of wonderful areas. So today, for our training and development workshop, we have Joanne Wharam, who is from Smart Support for Business. And she's here to tell us and help us communicate with people better in the right formats. Joanne, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what we're going to get in the workshop today?
Indeed. I am Joanne Wharam. I am a business psychologist is my official title. But for me, it's all about helping to engage and empower and looking at organisational culture. And a big part of that is people's personalities and how we interact with other people that are potentially different to ourselves. So today I'm going to go into DISC profiling, explain what it is, give you an introduction and a flavour for the different types of profiles, and a little bit about our emotional drivers, how we react and the difference between what's said and what's heard. Excuse me, I'm going to apologise because I've been talking all morning, so apologies if there are any husky voices or anything, but that's basically what I'm going to be doing in the course of this workshop.
That's fantastic, because the different people we meet in our lives, especially in business, changes from someone who's a high profile director to someone who's a bit of a chum in business, a bit of a friend. So you sort of relax a little bit, don't you? I did with you yesterday, Joanne. We had a little bit of an elbow nudge and a bit of a giggle, and then you can start to open up. But when you go to somewhere you don't know, it's very different. And I know I have two different ways of speaking. I have the very excitable Sue, and then when I meet people, high level business people, my voice drops a little bit and I speak a bit slower. It's really interesting. Don't know whether that has anything to do with what you're going to say, Joanne, but
maybe let's hold that thought for a question later. Yeah. Maybe.
So Kate's just here now. We won't let anyone else on so we can get stuck into it. So ladies, as I say, if you've got questions, pop them in the chat box, make loads of notes, but remember you can come back on and watch Joanne on replay. So over to you, Joanne. If everyone else could just mute themselves, that would be amazing. And then Joanne is going to start her workshop with us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate you giving up your lunch times because I know they're precious when you're busy people. So hopefully you can now see a slide with the title of the presentation, which is thank you, Sue. All around, do you feel you're speaking a different language to those around you? And when I'm talking about languages, I don't mean German, French, Italian, any of those native languages. I mean a DISC language. So excuse me, let's get into, before I go into that, hopefully you can see a slide with me on there. So this is a little bit about me. So I am, like I said, a business psychologist, and I've got a real passion for lifelong learning. Whether that's studying formally, I have 2 undergraduate degrees as well as a master's in psychology, and then I did an applying psychology in the workplace. So I really do like to challenge myself, and I like to learn, and I like to keep peeling back the layers to understand. When I was very young, I was always a people watcher. I was always the one that was sat reflecting and watching what was going on. But as I've matured, that's turned into very much of a natural fascination about people and what makes them who they are and what makes them tick. And I'm big into personal development as well as lifelong learning. Personal development for me is different, and I've spent the last 10 years working on myself, overcoming the things that have held me back. So the bugs in my operating system, if you like, and we'll touch a bit on that a bit more later. The picture of the sea is because I am happiest when I'm by the sea. It recharges my batteries, my energy, it lifts my spirits, and there's a pipe dream of wanting to move to the coast, but at some point, but I'm not sure how practical that will be because of all of the other things I do in business. So yeah, we'll see where that goes, but that is kind of where I'm at. So I'm just going to minimize that so I can't see you guys now, so apologies if there is anything in the chat, so you'll just have to jump in and shout. So what I'm going to cover, as I said earlier, is the different languages of DISC, but why they matter in terms of communication. Why do they matter so much, and what is the difference between what is said and what is heard or received by the other person, because we'll all know those times where actually we've said something and someone hasn't reacted the way we thought they might do. So what is DISC profiling? Now, I think the consensus was people have heard of it, but not really sure what it is and what it's about. But it's a human behaviour model that was originally presented by Professor William Moulton Marston in his 1928 book, Emotions of Normal People. And he actually also created Wonder Woman. This is a relatively new revelation to me, but he created Wonder Woman and apparently has made her have elements of all the 4 factors. I've not looked at any of that work, but that's apparently the same person. But from a practical business perspective, DISC delivers insights into the psychology of personality. So it's measuring those 4 unique areas in terms of making up the DISC acronym. So dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness, or sometimes referred to as compliance. We all will have a unique balance of all 4 of those factors, and we will have elements of all 4, but 1 or 2 will be your stronger ones. So I'm going to take you through today the basics for each style, but if you were to work more in depth with me, then you would get to know your unique balance, so to speak. Now, it's good that it's on replay because I'm going to go through quite a lot of information, and I am aware of that it will be quite fast and quite a lot of information. But what I want to do is give you a flavour for it. But if you do, the slides are very visual, so if you like words, then maybe you'll need to listen back to replay to add some of the detail in later. So let's get into the DISC. So why do we use it? Well, we use it to give ourselves a greater understanding of us, but also in a business context, if you have team members, even suppliers and clients, you could potentially apply this knowledge too. But fundamentally, you'll understand other people's, your communication style, but then if other people have done DISC as well, you can understand their communication style. By understanding your communication preferences, you'll also understand where your strengths are and how to make the most of those. But importantly, where are your blind spots? Because we all have them, we all have blind spots, and we all have stress points. But once you understand those and why they're there, you can then ultimately try to do something to minimize those. And ultimately, it can improve your well-being, so employee well-being, but determine strategies for how to interact with others more harmoniously, which obviously has a bottom line impact. We're all in business to some extent. Those of us that have our own businesses, it will all impact the bottom line of our business if we understand this knowledge. So let's start with back to this graph. So we talk about the fact that there are different profile types. So it's measuring basically your pace and your focus. So what DISC is looking at is, are you more fast-paced or more measured pace? Now, if you're fast-paced, you're likely to be quite assertive, optimistic, dynamic, bold, love being in charge, and outward appearance is really important to the fast-paced people. If you're more measured pace, if you sit on the other half of the graph, then you're likely to be more calm and careful and thoughtful, have lots of patience and stamina to get a job done, but quality is really important. So you can already see, even based on the pace we work, is really different. And then if we look at our focus, if you are more logic or task focused, then you're likely to be more questioning by nature, quite skeptical, quite challenging. You're likely to have quite a high technical ability and get a lot of pleasure from getting a job done and be really good at planning. But on the other side of the coin, if you're more people focused, then you're more receptive, you're more empathizing and agreeable. You're going to love interaction and caring and sharing, and you're going to be more worried about what others think than the task. So hopefully you can start to see that actually it's depending on where we sit, there's a lot of difference for people as well. And so those things in themselves are the starting point for DISC profiling. So I'm just trying to move my Zoom window because I want to be able to see your faces, but you're either over my notes or you're over the smooth thing to move the slide on, and now I can't. There we go. So let's start with the D profiles. The way that I work it with the D profiles is that I talk about them being the fast-paced, results-focused people. So they are all about, getting the results, getting projects started. So they're quite dominant characters, very direct, very demanding, driving. They're doers. They are the people that are quite decisive and quite daring. And in terms of communication style, they're the ones that are very telling. So they're to the point. So the way they speak is quite, like I said, direct, but also if you're having emails from them, then there'll be bullet points, or they'll be straight to the point in what they're asking. So there won't be, "Hi Sue, how are you?" It'll be, "Sue, can you do?" Or, "This is what I need to tell you," end of story. So you can tend to spot the Ds from that perspective, but also what you notice with the D profiles is self-confidence. So they're very direct, very forceful, risk-taking. They're the ones that'll be, cutting corners, taking risks, but they're very independent characters. So I think for me, the self-confidence, directness, and independence, they're the ones that you'll probably notice more. So in a networking situation, they're the ones with the real sort of strong, firm, short, sharp handshakes. And if they're asking questions, they generally are interested in what's the bottom line. So as you can imagine, their strengths are all around leading projects and having lots of determination. But the blind spots of the D profile is that they can appear to be, to other profiles, quite impatient and insensitive, because they are very fast paced. If they're more steady paced profiles come into contact with them, they tend to feel that they're being, the Ds are being quite impatient and insensitive to their thoughts, their needs, their feelings. In terms of motivation for the D profile, it's all about challenge, control, independence. They love new projects or ones with tangible results. If you want them to see a project through, there needs to be a tangible result for them at the end. Otherwise, they'll lose that, that interest in that project. So I always say they're great starters, but not great completer finishers. And they love competition. In terms of stress points, though, again, Ds are, their stress point is inefficiency. If they see that something isn't being done in the most efficient way, or that someone's being indecisive, then that will really sort of give them anxiety, stress, whatever language you want to use. It's their stress point. And realistically, what they're worried about, the thing that's their real stress point, is getting things wrong. So the underlying fear behind that is a loss of control, and they fear being vulnerable or being taken advantage of. That's fundamentally where the D profile struggles. So we're going to move on to the Is. So Is are, again, fast-paced, but these are the opposite side of the coin from their focus. So these are all about people and relationships. And so they are by nature very influential, very inspirational, very interactive and impressive, inducing. They make stuff happen. They're interested in you as a person, but they're also really interesting because they know loads of people. Their communication style, they're very much more talking. So their conversation, they're chatty. They'll share stories, they'll share feelings. They're quite happy in that environment, the Is. So you're going to notice them because they're quite charming. They're really full of enthusiasm, and they're very sociable, very optimistic, I think, is a real key one. They're very glass half full people, the I profiles, excuse me. And the Is, you'll notice, because of their talkability, you'll often hear them before you see them, because they are full of energy, full of enthusiasm, and busy chatting to whoever's around. So when, in terms of what question they would ask, it's who will be there. Whatever you're doing, it's they'll want to know who's going to be there, who am I going to meet, who can I connect. So in terms of their strengths, it's all about persuading. It's about enthusiasm. It's, like I said, glass half full, everything's great, but they're really good at persuading and inspiring, motivating people to take action. But the blind spot of the I profile is they're quite impulsive, because it's about people and relationships. They're quite impulsive. They're quite emotional in many cases as well, but they're quite disorganized as well. Is are really good at talking about things. They're not so great, excuse me, about following things through and doing things. So disorganized is yeah, I always have my best friend, one of my best friends in mind here, because she is the most beautiful soul, but she is so disorganized. Her entire wardrobe was on her bedroom floor, because she'd not bothered to clean. She'd washed it but then put it on the floor and left it there because she couldn't be bothered to hang it up. That was too much detail, too much repetitive. In terms of motivators, they're all about social recognition and compliments. So making I feel good about themselves by that sort of praise in front of public, you know, whether that's in a team situation or winning awards, you know, that's the I's real dream, really, is to be recognized and complimented by other people. But as I implied with this organization, they don't like to be they need freedom of from control and detail. So they don't want routine, repetitive. They love to have ideas, to be able to share ideas and to teach other people how to do things. But like I said, in terms of stress points, routine, repetitive work is a no-go for them. It doesn't give them energy. And I think, again, that's something to think about with DISC profiling, is once you understand where your profile is, if you can match your work to your core strengths, then life doesn't feel quite so effortful. We can't consistently do who we're not, so we have to learn where our strengths are so we can do more of that, which gives us more energy. Excuse me. So in terms of the fears of the I's, as you can imagine, it's that lack of people, it's being rejected, is, you know, that's their biggest fear. Losing their influence, but being ignored. You know, I's really struggled in the lockdown situation that we had, if we can cast our minds back to COVID, that's starting to feel like a long time ago, but I's really struggled, and they were the ones probably organising the online quizzes and the, you know, social events online, because they were really struggling without that social network and without that contact with people. So now let's steady the pace down a little bit. Let's look at the S profiles. So S profiles are steady paced, but these are still focused on the people around them. So these are all around being of service and being of support. So by nature, they are very steady, very stable characters, really sincere and supportive, quite submissive and shy and sentimental, but really amiable characters. They're a really gentle soul. If they often refer to them as the mums of the business, if I'm working with teams, when I'm working with teams, because they're the ones that are looking out for everybody else. So it's all about being of service and being of support. So they're less obvious to notice in many respects because you don't notice them, and that's probably an indication, because they are very calm approach, very humble, really good at diplomacy, but also they're the big team players, and they've got a tendency to, you know, inspire others and work with others in the team, but they don't want to be front and center, they don't want to take the limelight, but they've got lots and lots of patience, so they're a really great asset to any organization. The question that the S profile would ask is, how do you want this done? So they are brilliant at teamwork and follow through. That's their core strengths, and that's why they ask lots of questions about, how do you want it done? How can I help you? But the problem, the blind spot with the S profile is they're really indecisive at times. They really don't like change, but the indecision is the biggest factor, really, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to work out, what is it you want me to say? How do you want me to answer this question? Because once you understand as an S how you want someone to answer it, then you can give an answer. Or how should I say, how someone wants you to answer it, then you'll give an answer. But they don't tend to do well with making decisions on their own. So that can be a big weakness. But in terms of motivating them, it's really easy. Keep things steady, status quo. You know, they want security. You know, they want to know their job's safe. They want to work in a harmonious, supportive team environment. They want to be accepted as part of the team, and they want manageable projects that they can cooperate and help on, but actually sincere appreciation as well. So whereas the I's want public praise and recognition, S's actually want a quiet thank you, a quiet email thank you, a quiet one-to-one conversation. Thank you for your efforts, it has been noted. But, you know, the emphasis with the S profile though is on sincere. So don't try to compliment an S if you don't genuinely mean it, because they will know, they'll pick up on it, and that will damage the relationship. So the stress point of the S is impatience and insensitivity. So if you go back to what I was saying around the D profile, so D profiles are fast-paced, task-focused. It's all about fast movement, and they can be impatient and insensitive. And also the S profile can be indecisive. That's one of the big factors that D profiles don't like. They want quick decisions. So you can start to see how having different profiles can impact on your relationships, both working and personal. I need to stress here as well. So the way to look after the S's and not give them too much stress as well is also don't change too many things at once. If you've got to change things because business has changed, the whole world changed, didn't it, with COVID? But don't try and change too many things at once. If you've got to change, make it sure it's little things, if you can, each little thing at a time, and make sure that you have conversation with them, that you will let them ask the questions so that they can feel comfortable and safe with the changes that you're proposing. Because really what the S's fear is a loss of stability and a loss of harmony, but actually they don't want to offend other people. So that's where the again, people and relationships bit comes. They absolutely don't want to offend other people. So let's, again, steady paced, but now let's move to the task focused steady paced people. So these are your C profiles, and these are all about quality assurance, technical, policy. So details, facts. They're very compliant, very careful and conscientious, quite competent, very competent in some cases, depending on where they are up the scale, but very cautious and contemplative and very clear cut. Things tend to be black and white with the C profiles. And unlike the I profile that's glass half full, the C profile will generally be glass half empty. So again, you can start to see the maybe potential conflict between those two profiles. In terms of communication style for the C profile, it's all about written detail. It's emails, it's the long emails with lots and lots of facts and information. That's your C profile. And you'll notice them because they're very perfectionist. They're very precise, very accurate, very analytical, quite skeptical, but they're very quiet and reserved and very private individual C profiles. If you're trying to build a relationship with someone you suspect is a C, go really steady and talk about things that are task focused, so their jobs, their work, how do they mow their lawn, things that are task focused rather than, tell me about you, tell me about your family. They'll hate that. So go really steady with the C profiles. C's are the ones that are asking why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way? Why? So from a strengths perspective, you can see they'd be really great at planning and systems because they're constantly asking, why are we doing that? How can we do it better? Why don't we do it X way instead of Y? So they're really good at plannings and systems and logic and like I said, data analysis, proofreading, quality assurance. All of those things are real strengths of the C profile. But their blind spot is they can be very overly critical. Because of that perfectionism, they can appear to be quite, like I said, overly critical to some other people, and they overanalyze. So I work with a lot of accountants, and I've had conversations with accountants in the past about, you don't need to spend 3 hours trying to balance the balance sheet for that sake of that 20 pence. I know we've got a bookkeeper on, and I'm sure she's equally detail oriented, but sometimes you have to take a judgment, and C's can be overly analytical and over detailed sometimes. In terms of motivating them, again, really simple. They like to be accurate. They like to be in control of their workload. They like to know that the tasks are manageable. They love having specialist areas. So also practical procedures, getting them involved in writing those. They love gaining new knowledge. They like clear instructions, though. They want to know what is expected of them. So if you're working with a C profile, you don't have a lot of C in you, you're going to have to learn how to adjust your communication to give them more detail than you're comfortable with, so that hopefully they're a little bit more comfortable with what you're asking. Stress points for the C profiles are all about criticism. If you criticize someone, and it doesn't even have to be overt criticism, if they perceive you're questioning their way of doing something, that can feel very critical to them, and that's a real stress point for them, and they hate slipshod methods. So again, I's don't do detail, don't do structure, don't do routine repetitive. So C's really struggle with that because they don't understand how people can function in the world without having very clear definitions of what should be done and how it should be done, and everything's not done in a nice, neat and orderly way. That the real thing for the real fear for the C profiles is criticism. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want slipshod methods, but they don't want to be wrong. Go back to what I said at the beginning about the descriptions, precision and perfectionism. And C profiles will not be comfortable if they get something wrong. So hopefully that's given you a feel for the different types of profiles. And like I said, if you are really interested in this, then I would suggest you get your DISC profile done, because we're not just one thing or another. Most people actually have 2 working strengths, so you might resonate with 2 of those. I've actually got 3 working strengths, but you'll always have 1 or 2 or 3 above the line, what we would call above the line working strengths, and 1 that's your support factor. So it's knowing your balance, because it's the way those things play out together that really make you who you are as a person. But just to give you now some examples of how DISC can help. So some of the work that I do, like I said, I work with accountants, but I work with teams predominantly. But read this as relationships. So it could be between you and clients, it could be you and customers, it could be personal relationships. But one of the key ways I use it is to improve relationships and improve teamwork. So for example, I was called in by one of my accountants because actually there were issues between 2 members of the team that was causing disharmony and unsettlement in the team. Now, S profile, there was a few people with S profile or elements of S in there, so disharmony is one of their big stress points. And one of the team had rung me up out of the blue and said she was ready to quit. So I quickly contacted the partner, and we decided we needed to act fast. And so within about 3 weeks, we did a team session. And the first thing I did was profile everybody in the team and did one-to-one feedback sessions with everybody so that they could recognize their own strengths. And they all agreed, yes, this is me, this is my profile. So that was great, because what I then did is I went into the team session armed with that knowledge, and I took them through the D, the I, the S, the C, like I've done just now with you guys, but in a bit more depth. And then I went into, right, these are the profiles of your team members. Who are these descriptive words about? And to see whether they could understand who the people in their teams were. Can they recognize the other traits? Can they realize that, we're not all the same? And it increased their awareness that actually there was 1 or 2 of them said, oh, so not everybody thinks the way I do. No, that's the key point. So it increased their awareness of each other's styles and the need to be a bit more different when they talk to other people, and it increased their empathy, which in a team building situation can only be a good thing. We had an open and frank conversation about where things hadn't gone right. We put in boundaries about ways to communicate better with each other, and also if someone did do something in a way that somebody wasn't comfortable with, that they were able to move on and go and speak to that person openly based on the DISC conversation. So rather than you've done X that's upset me, it's like, okay, this happened and this is how this came across to me with my profile. So again, all of this applies to every relationship, whether that's even on a basic terms in a one-to-one after a networking meeting, at a networking meeting. If you can understand the other people's profiles and start to spot the differences, then you can adapt to the person you're speaking to, and that will ultimately improve the success of that relationship. So the flip side of good relationships is conflict. I'll not use the word bad relationships, but conflict, difficult conversations, difficult atmospheres. And again, I was called in by an accountant to work with one of her clients. They were a legal practice, and one of the partners and one of the senior team members were clashing, let's just put it that way. And the partner was seriously considering letting the team member go, even though she was quite senior in the practice, quite a responsible position. She just felt that she couldn't continue to work with this individual. So again, did the individual assessments, the one-to-one feedbacks, they learned about themselves, they agreed everything was them. And when I talked about their blind spots and their communication preferences, I then sat them together in a meeting room. And it was a bit nerve-wracking, I've got to say, but I put them in the room together, and I started to share the different types of profiles. There, I didn't go into in depth about every profile, but I started to talk about, okay, so I'll use the name Sue. So Sue, this is your profile, and then Jenny, oh right, this is your profile. And they started to realize that they were very different to each other. They started to realize that they weren't deliberately trying to annoy each other, which was what they both felt like independently, but weren't saying that. They actually demonstrated how some of their issues were just down to clash of communication. And again, this led to a very open and frank conversation about their roles, and the problem team member was like, well, why are you doing X when that's my skill set? Why don't you focus on Y and let me do all the X? And ultimately it saved that team member's job, because the responsibilities were juggled so that we could match them to the skills of the people that were doing it, and it improved the efficiencies and allowed the department to focus on sales, which was what she was great at, which increased turnover. Happy days. So final example how I can use this is in recruitment. I'll go over this, a bit quicker, because there's very little to say on that, other than to say I profile the role. I understand what the business owner wants. We find the skill sets. We create the DISC profile for the role. So that means then that I can help them to craft their job adverts, or the job descriptions, or their instructions that they give to the agency, recruitment agencies, so that they can hopefully attract the right type of clients, which cuts down the amount of CVs and applications hopefully you're going to get from people that you would never give the job to. You would then profile the shortlisted candidates. So you'd probably do an initial interview, then you'd do the profile. And after the profile's done, I can then give interview questions and areas to explore to make sure that that person can do what they need them to do. So it saves time and effort when you recruit, and it increases the chance of potentially a successful recruitment, saving lots of money and time, because it's a big thing in recruitment. So let's move on to the difference between what's said and what's heard. I started to notice that even though people had similar DISC profiles, their behaviours were quite different to each other, and that there were communication issues between people with similar profiles, which on paper, from a psychology perspective and a DISC perspective, shouldn't happen. So I was wanting to understand why that was, and why that communication wasn't received in the right way. And it comes down to perspectives. So when communication breaks down, it's often down to different perspectives. On the two images, there's the one on the left with the sticks. Two different people can look at something and see different things, but that both equally valid, but both can appear to be contradictory. So you look from one side, it's clearly 4, but yet you look from the other and it's clearly 3. And that happens a lot in communication, is people have alternate viewpoints that are contradictory but are equally valid, and it's about helping people to understand the differences and communicate more effectively. Perspectives that also come from our life experiences. Our life experiences influence where we stand and what we see and hear when communication is going through our brain filters. And so if you look at the elephant picture, depending where they're stored, again, equally valid perspectives. Well, it could be by the chunky leg, it could be a tree. You've got the trunk that could be a snake or a spear. You get the point. It's our life experiences change our perspectives, and based on that, even that basic thing, you think, oh yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, but there's more to it than that. So I talked about doing my personal development, and I came across another profiling tool, which I'm going to briefly touch on a little bit now, just to give you some idea of, again, how people are different even beyond the DISC. I always refer to DISC as being the surface level, but underneath that there's a driver. So we all have, as humans, we're like PCs, we've got different operating systems. So we have an operating system that effectively runs us based on our biology, based on our psychology. We've got a PC operating system, but like PCs, those systems have got bugs, and we need to discover and remove the bugs to help us to be able to deal with life in a different way. So we are, some people are more heart-led, some people are more mind-led, some people are more body led. And so if we just move on to the next screen, I'll talk about it in terms of those operating systems and our core drivers. So depending where you sit in terms of heart, body, or head, that influences our perspectives, these core drivers. So, you know, the core drivers are evident as we grow. So if you consider a newborn baby, their first instinct as they come out of the womb is to cry, because they're born into an alien environment, and they don't feel safe. They've come out of that nice safe haven of the womb, and they suddenly don't feel safe. So security is the first driver that all of us experience. And then as infants, we start to notice that we get attention when we do things like smile or giggle, or, you know, we do things, and that makes us feel nice because we got attention, or we got approved of, to use the language of approval, you know, and that makes us feel good. So again, we learn that, you know, if we do nice things, that makes us feel, people notice us and we like that, and that makes us feel good. So we do more of that. But then those of you that have got children will know we hit the terrible twos. And this isn't, you know, they learn at this point that smiling's not enough anymore, you know, and we know this, you know, reflect on your own children or children that you know around you, you know, they realize that actually smiling's not enough, being cute's not enough. So to get attention, we need to change our behavior. So we start to control things. We drop toys on the floor to get someone to pick them up. We throw tantrums. We, you know, if we perceive no one's watching, and I've seen this a lot with toddlers, if they think nobody's watching them, they start causing uproar, because we control things to get what we want. And so these three drivers, they are almost primed in us, and we carry all three of them through our lives. But everybody has one that is their strongest, and that is what influences all of our emotions. And our emotions lead to our behavior. So in terms of the emotion that comes from the core drivers, they're very different. So as you can see, you know, if you're heart-based and you like approval, actually the emotion, the negative emotion underlying that is a fear of shame, is actually, or a belief of shame that actually, you know, who we are isn't, you know, fundamentally lovable. It's about what we do. We need to be seen to be doing things to be loved. So we have, you know, things that we see, like the behaviors that we see, so of anger, tears, anxiety, they may have different underlying thoughts and emotions driving it. So one person is potentially going to react differently to another. Now, I don't expect any one of you to go away from here and be an expert in any of this, because it takes a lot of knowledge and experience. But I think all I'm trying to raise with this is that, you know, everybody is different, and you need to just maybe have a little bit more empathy and awareness that not everybody thinks like you do, and what we see might not be what we perceive to be what's going on. So, you know, if we look at thinking and thoughts, you know, we have 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day, according to scientists, but how many do you remember? You know, out of those, they reckon every 1.5 seconds we have a new thought, but most of them take place below the level of consciousness. So, you know, things like breathing and the heart beating, we don't have to think about it. It's a subconscious thing, but that also goes with, you know, other thoughts and other emotions that we experience. You know, we only see about, like with the iceberg, we only see about 10% of the iceberg. So we only know of about 10% of our thoughts that are consciously aware of. 90% of that is in the subconscious. So only 1 to 10% of those thoughts are conscious, and that's 54,000 thoughts that are invisible. So, you know, lots of people will use positive thinking, and I'm not against positive thinking as such, but what I would say is, how many negative thoughts do you need to bring your mood down? One. You know, we all know this, but we spend most of our time, you know, in personal development arena looking at the 10%, when actually what we need to be focusing on is what's in that 90% under the water, because that's what's driving the emotional reaction and the thoughts. And like I said, what we see may be different. So if we take this image of anger, you know, we see anger, you know, frustration, irritation, they're all the same thing. It's a degree of anger. It's just some people find frustrated a less confrontational word. But what is going below that is possibly different for different people, because hidden below that waterline are some of the sorts of emotional pain and discomfort that people are unaware of. It's the 90%. We don't deal with those emotions directly, because, you know, we're taught as Brits to bottle it, or, you know, we don't necessarily want to go there. Some of us try and lock them away. But when we don't deal with our emotions that are affecting us, then that can turn into anger. So, you know, people can feel confused, or can feel marginalized or offended, or, you know, excluded, or, you know, they could even just feel betrayed, but it comes out as anger. So again, just because someone is angry doesn't mean that it's just about anger. There's possibly more to it than that. The same with anxiety. We don't know what feelings are underlying. They could be sad, they could be confused, they could be overwhelmed, they could feel rejected or embarrassed. So again, in situations where people don't behave or react the way we expect, then we need to consider that it may not be about what we said, but about a person's underlying feelings. And so we may just need to give them some space and try again later to calmly explain it in a different way. So again, I don't expect you to be the experts, just try to understand that different people are different. So to recap then, remember DISC, dominance, influence, steadiness, compliance, people or task, steady or fast. You know, that's the fundamentals of it. But understand yourself. First and foremost, if you're interested in this work, understand yourself, do your own profile so you can remove your blind spots, you can discover the strategies to minimize your stress and overcome the overwhelm from your fears so that you can fundamentally get more out of life. That's why I talk about in my 60 seconds, help people to unlock potential. You know, then maximize your relationships by understanding that the same thing about the other people close to you in life, and adapt to suit them. Then think about, you know, what you're saying. Remember, it goes through people's filters and perspectives and based on their experience. So before it gets heard. So they'll hear it, but they won't necessarily listen, if that makes sense. But it goes through those filters, and reactions come often based on an initial gut response, based on our filters and based on those bugs. And the reaction that we can see can have different underlying causes. And so empathy and understanding really is key. So I think that's the end of anything else. I'll just put my details up briefly. So if I can now try and find where you've all disappeared to. So over to you. I don't know if you want to take back.
Joanne, that was absolutely brilliant. Every time you went through the D, the I, the S, and the C, I felt like I had traits with each one. Is that normal, or is that just...
It's let me just stop share because I want to be able to see you.
Yeah.
There you are, you're back. Sorry, I managed to minimize you, but then I couldn't see anybody, so I was talking to myself for the whole of that, so apologies, I couldn't see any reactions. I think, as I said to you at the beginning, we all have all aspects of all four. It's just the amount of it. So yes, you will probably resonate, and there may be one or two, or even in my case 3, that you resonate more strongly with than the others, and that's based on your profile. But we all ultimately have all 4 traits, because it's about personality, and we don't have gaps in our personality. But yeah, you'll find that there'll be one that you'll be drawn more strongly to, probably, and that's like I said, why best thing is do it. And don't, I would say this as a DISC practitioner, but please don't use the freebie ones, because all they do is they go, right, that's your dominant strength, that's who you are. And it's not that. You're a balance of all 4, and you need to understand how much of each of the 4 you've got and how they play off with each other, because you know, I'll use I for an example, because I think, you know, that a few of us that might have recognized at least one person on the call in that, and I think that's you know, I on its own, they're really outgoing, they're really gregarious, they're really loud. But if you've got an IS, they can turn the I on, but actually generally underneath that there's a quietness as well. So I don't like the free ones, because like I said, they just pigeonhole based on your dominant, I would say, your dominant strength. They don't look at the other 3 and every single factor where it falls on the graphs in my reports, etc. tells me something else about you, and it all factors into the personality. But yeah, it's quite common that you'll spot multiple words, and that's why we've got lots of words, and that the assessment I use is word based, because it's easy. And you know, we all have, again, people have different expectations and interpretations of words. So yeah, sorry, you can tell I'm really passionate about this subject.
No,
so
that's brilliant. And do you know what, you can, and you're very passionate, but also you have great knowledge of this. So I'm going to now end our recording and thank you officially, Joanne, for your time today. This is more a development workshop. This is not so much training, it's about development, isn't it? And understanding your possible future clients. Fantastic in networking, because you can understand people and learn how to approach, how to reply, how to communicate. So fabulous. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We're going to now go off and do our questions, but thank you for watching. You've got Joanne's details, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Thank you.